trying to let out all of the... It's weird. It's like they're insecurities, even though I've done this so much. But I haven't done one quite like this before. I am working on this setup, and I'm ready to go for it. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Y.E.S, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. Brand new setup. I mean, it's like the same room, just I'm styling things up a little differently. I'm trying to see how I feel about that. Let me know how you think about it. Today, I'm going to review the album, So Help Me God. It's the 6th studio album released by Brantley Gilbert. This is only the 2nd full-length album by Brantley Gilbert that I've reviewed. And I've got to say, there is something about his voice and his style that is charming. Now, I didn't fall head over heels for the last album, Fire and Brimstone. It's a little bit longer of an album than this one. Not by a whole lot, but a little bit longer. And so there was a lot more for me at that time to absorb. This time around, this is only 10 tracks long. And I thought, that's great. That's perfect for a guy like me. I just want an album that's barely long enough to get the point across, and this one worked. I really liked what we have here. Let's go over the positives first. As I hinted, I like this album. The things that I probably liked most about this album were the themes and topics in the songs. Even in some of the songs where I was a little bit lost or thought that there was something to be had still, depending on what precise variable or element of the song was losing me, most of the themes were actually still working really well. One of the songs that actually is kind of a good example of that is Miles of Memories. It's the 3rd track in the album. This one kind of talks about just kind of memory lane. There's a lot of country songs that kind of do that. I don't fault anybody trying to share their own personal memories, and that's usually what makes them a little bit more interesting and original. It's kind of a timely topic, but for some reason, even though within the country genre itself, they all have something that tie themselves together, each singer still is able to characterize their lyrics in a very specific way. Or they hone in and specify something that you can imagine in a more small town or rural area. One thing I also really liked about this song in particular was the intro, which kind of had guitar effects that kind of reminded me of Angels and Airwaves, actually. The song that actually follows right after that is She's the One. It's just basically a love song, also kind of going down memory lane, because Brantley Gilbert is sharing the song through kind of the point of view he's having, sharing the story with his grandpa. And he's kind of sharing his love story about Brantley's grandmother and how they both kind of have similar moments that they're going through when falling in love with their respective wife. It's just kind of a heartwarming thing, especially since there's not a lot of people who are kind of convinced that men these days can have as much emotion or share special emotions between each other. I mean, I guess it makes more sense between family members that would be slightly more acceptable, but still, it's kind of something rare, especially to see in a song like this, and that's a theme that I really enjoy. Another element I think Brantley really hones in well is he likes to have fun. Now, I think that there are probably slightly more serious topics in this album, but when you bring down the worst country song of all time, that actually is the title of the track, he had some fun here. Now, he probably got some help along the way. It has Hardy and Toby Keith in this song, and they probably put their brains together in order to make some really interesting and very humorous lines in here. But works all for the better in this instance. I'm perfectly okay with that. And yeah, if you do listen to that track and you find yourself agreeing with it in a serious way, not ironically serious, you may have to check yourself in some way. How about some negatives? Well, probably the thing that is not full-blown negative in my opinion, it's just something that I noticed, is that Brantley's voice, I wouldn't know if it's necessarily raspy in certain instances. But what I mean by that, I don't know if that's the proper characterization, but it kind of gets that way. And I would say that sometimes his voice doesn't match the volume of what the rest of the production wants to do. Now, I think most of the time he figures out a way to balance it out pretty well, especially during the verses. It's when the chorus comes in where I am a little unsure always, because sometimes he likes to get the guitar rolling and some slightly heavier drum beats in there. And I think that can drown out his very beautiful voice. Most of the time I think it's working okay just fine, but I would say that sometimes I don't know if he needs to just growl a little more, or if it is just something about identifying how to balance vocals with the rest of the production. It's just something to think about because his voice is very particular. I'm like halfway convinced that if I had not heard of him before, I'd be very shocked about what kind of voice he has. I feel like he would have something a little bit more grungy. But, I'm not complaining about what we have right here. The second thing I definitely know that I probably have an issue with more than most other people is just some of the word choices in the lyrics. For a majority of the songs in here, it's very mild for the pickiness that I have. There's only really probably 2 songs in here where I would say, like, that's, too much for me. I would go with Son of the Dirty South, which actually is kind of a thematically fun song in there, but his feature with Jelly Roll, he is a bit more vulgar than I would care to have, even though I kind of get it for what his addition is in the song, but still, I feel like there's a way around it. But also, when you feature other artists in country, I feel like you do have to be particular. Now, this isn't the only time he does that, but this is the one that probably stands out the most, and it is probably the one that is the most distracting. And then the title track, So Help Me God, this is one that's a little hard to pinpoint because I'm very particular about that kind of religious side of lyrical use, unless you're actually making like actual Christmas music. I mean, Christian music. But I would say that I think his heart was in the right place in what he wanted to do reverently. I don't think everyone's going to agree with that, and I'm kind of divided between that lyricism. It's just kind of a funny thing I felt like I wanted to mention. Again, I don't think it was ill-willed, but I don't know if I completely believe that it's the most reverent way to go about it. But thematically, I really like the story that the song is sharing here. I want to start trying to put the highlights kind of near the end, because then I can give you guys a better idea of what some of those songs are that I really liked in the positive aspect, and then we can gradually drift away from the negatives, or at least, my perspective of what constitutes as negatives for an album. So let's get into a few of those songs where I think you, the viewer, would really like. The first song I'm going to mention here for the highlights is Rolex on a Redneck. This one is very fun. I really like this song because it's funny. It does acknowledge how much materialism does not matter in the grand and long or even eternal scheme of things here. But he's also saying, hey, you can make a quality life by grinding, putting in the work, saving up, doing what you have to. And he doesn't shy away from the things that he would like to buy because of that. Again, he does acknowledge the eternal scheme of things. He even has a reference for tithing. Hey, gotta pay your dues if you're a Christian believing person. Or, if you make donations religiously, or even just because you have a need or have a desire to give, that's great too. A quality life is nothing to be ashamed of, as long as you understand that the quality life here in what I call the mortal world isn't everything. So I think that's a pretty good message to take away from this. I would highlight She's the One once again. You could really share this song in various ways with multiple people that you care about, whether it's something you can relate to with your parents, an aunt and uncle, grandparents. Hey, you never know. I really enjoyed the song How to Talk to Girls. It sounds like he's kind of throwing in the perspective of him already being married and even sometimes not completely understanding what it means to talk to a female. But it is interesting. I think there is a lot of originality that comes from the lyrics in this song. And lastly, Gone But Not Forgotten. Just one that makes you ponder a little bit more about important things. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on this album. There's definitely a lot of things where it felt like this is a guy who's singing very genuine things in this album. And again, I like the fact that it's not too long and I'm able to ponder it pretty easily. And I think the actual talent in his voice, the style of his voice, is one that we can appreciate for the fact that it's unique and distinctive from a bunch of other country voices, at least ones that I am familiar with. And whether you think it's one of the more distinct country albums of this year or not, I think that there is something to be had when you can actually appreciate deeper messages in songs. That's something that I am still having a hard time finding nowadays in any genre, but usually that's the stuff that I gravitate toward. I like good beats. I like unique talents and sounds, but if you can craft a great song, you're doing something right, and usually the talent follows. Usually there is something that connects the two. So after having listened and reviewed this album, how do you think I'm going to recommend this album? I'm actually going to give it a yeah/good. In both the categories of production and creativity, I personally think that they are on a higher level than Fire and Brimstone. Again, my opinion. Maybe you think differently. Couldn't say about the other albums. Maybe, hopefully, one of these days I'll be able to actually get some free time to listen to them because there is a talent that I would love to revisit. Lyrically in here, again, I thought that perhaps there were moments where vocally it might not have been balanced as well with the production, but I think for the majority it really did well. But a few of those songs where just some crude language was inserted, I thought we could live without. Again, I know that I sound like a broken record when I talk about that in any album, but in this instance it did pop up ever so slightly more, but more particularly in at least 2 tracks. But thankfully, the songwriting